Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The vastness of space was a void, a silence so profound it swallowed the slightest echoes of human thought. Yet, within this emptiness, the Pathfinder streaked through the darkness, a lone vessel propelled by humanity's insatiable curiosity. Its mission was clear: explore the oldest star system ever detected, one that whispered secrets of the universe's infancy through faint gravitational anomalies. The crew, a collection of seasoned scientists and engineers, each driven by their own motives, stood on the cusp of a discovery that could reshape their understanding of existence itself. As the Pathfinder closed in on the ancient system, the mood aboard shifted from excitement to a tense anticipation. The ship's captain, Emily Carson, a stoic figure with a decorated military background, remained focused on the mission. Her co-pilot, Jacob Reed, a former astronaut turned astrophysicist, monitored the ship's approach with unwavering precision. The others, Dr. Alan Price, a brilliant but aloof physicist, Dr. Nora Hayes, a linguist with a passion for ancient civilizations, and Dr. Leo Martinez, an engineer with a knack for problem-solving, each felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The system's central star, a dying giant bathed in a soft red glow, loomed ahead as the Pathfinder entered orbit around a seemingly lifeless planet. Initial scans revealed an atmosphere just within the breathable range, though thin and laden with trace elements suggesting a history of volcanic activity. But it was the massive structure on the planet's surface that caught everyone's attention, a sprawling complex of geometric shapes, standing starkly against the barren landscape. The structures were old, impossibly old, yet they bore no signs of erosion or decay. Instead, they seemed preserved in time, untouched by the elements. Landing coordinates locked, Jacob announced, his voice steady despite the anxiety that gripped the crew. The Pathfinder descended slowly, its thrusters kicking up clouds of red dust as it settled near the edge of the structure. The crew suited up, each member taking a moment to compose themselves before stepping out into the alien world. The ground crunched beneath their boots as they approached the entrance to the complex. Dr. Price took the lead, his scanning equipment humming softly as it analyzed the materials and energy signatures surrounding them. The walls were made of an unknown alloy, something far beyond human technology. But what truly captivated them were the symbols etched into the surfaces, complex patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic glow. Dr. Hayes was immediately drawn to the symbols, her fingers tracing the lines as if they held some hidden message. "These patterns, they're not just decoration," she muttered, her mind racing to make sense of the language. "They're communicating something, but it's not like anything we've ever encountered before." Dr. Martinez, always the pragmatist, focused on the architecture. "This place isn't just old. It's ancient, but it's still functional. Whatever civilization built this, they had technology far beyond our own." The deeper they ventured, the more the structure revealed itself to be a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, all connected by a central hub. In the heart of this complex lay a massive, circular chamber. At its center was a monolithic device, an intricate construct of rings and spheres, suspended in mid-air by some unseen force. The device emitted a low hum, a sound that seemed to resonate with the very air they breathed. "This is it," Dr. Price said, his voice filled with awe. "This is the source of the energy readings. It's been dormant for who knows how long, but it's still alive in some way." Without warning, the device responded to their presence. The rings began to spin slowly, the spheres within shifting in precise, fluid motions. A beam of light shot out from the device, illuminating the walls of the chamber with a cascading array of symbols and images. The air grew thick with a strange, almost tangible energy, and the crew felt a deep, primal fear settle in their chests. Dr. Hayes quickly set to work, attempting to decode the symbols as they flickered across the walls. "This isn't just a machine," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a communication device. It's trying to tell us something." But as she worked, the symbols began to change, growing more complex and chaotic. The device was reacting, perhaps even adapting to their presence. Dr. Price's equipment started to emit warning signals, radiation levels were rising, and the energy output of the device was increasing at an alarming rate. "We need to shut it down," Dr. Martinez urged, his engineering instincts kicking in. "If this thing goes critical, it could take out the entire planet, and us with it." But Dr. Hayes wasn't ready to give up. "No, wait. It's not trying to harm us. It's searching for something. Maybe it's trying to understand us, or maybe it's looking for a response." Captain Carson stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. "We don't have time for maybes. We need to contain this situation before it gets out of hand. Dr. Price, can you deactivate it?" Dr. Price hesitated, his eyes locked on the device. "I can try, but we don't know what kind of fail-safes it has. It could be more dangerous if we tamper with it." The room seemed to vibrate with tension as they debated their next move. But before a decision could be made, the device emitted a piercing tone, and the symbols on the walls shifted into a coherent image, a star map, ancient and unfamiliar, but clearly showing the system they were in. At the center of the map was a bright, pulsating light, surrounded by a series of concentric circles. It was a warning, a signal that had been broadcast across the stars for millennia. And now, the Pathfinder had triggered its final message. "It's a containment system," Dr. Hayes realized, her voice barely a whisper. This entire complex was built to keep something contained, a force, a power, something so dangerous that it had to be locked away. The realization hit them all at once. They had not just discovered an ancient relic of a long-lost civilization, they had uncovered a prison, and their arrival had set in motion events that could lead to a catastrophic release. Captain Carson made the call. "We're leaving. Now. Dr. Price, do whatever you can to stabilize that device. We can't let it follow us out of here." With urgency, the crew began their retreat. Dr. Price worked quickly, adjusting the device's settings, hoping to reset it to its dormant state. The device's hum grew louder, the ring spinning faster as the energy levels fluctuated wildly. Finally, with a desperate twist of a dial, Dr. Price managed to deactivate the device, plunging the chamber back into silence. But as they turned to leave, a new sound echoed through the halls, a deep, resonant rumble, as if the planet itself was awakening. The ground beneath them shook, and the walls of the complex began to crack, releasing bursts of light and energy. Whatever they had done, it wasn't enough. The ancient defenses were failing. The crew sprinted back to the Pathfinder, the ground splitting open behind them as the complex began to collapse. The ship's engines roared to life, and they lifted off just as the entire structure caved in, sending plumes of dust and debris into the thin atmosphere. As they ascended into space, the crew watched in stunned silence as the planet below began to change. The surface, once barren and lifeless, now glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, spreading from the ruins of the complex across the entire world. "It's not over," Jacob said, his voice barely audible. "Whatever was down there, it's waking up." Captain Carson nodded, her expression grim. "We need to get this information back to Earth. They need to know what we've found, what we've unleashed." But even as they set course for home, a sense of dread hung over the crew. They had ventured into the unknown, seeking knowledge and understanding, but instead had uncovered something that defied both. The universe was older, darker, and more dangerous than they had ever imagined, and their place within it was more fragile than they had ever feared. As the Pathfinder vanished into the void, the planet behind them continued to pulse with a silent, ominous energy. The ancient star system, once dormant and forgotten, was now very much alive, and watching. The Pathfinder hurtled through the dark expanse of space, leaving behind the glowing, pulsating planet that had once seemed so lifeless. The crew was silent, each member lost in their thoughts as the enormity of what they had just experienced settled in. The ship's hum was the only sound that filled the cockpit, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy that had nearly consumed them just hours before. Captain Carson's gaze remained fixed on the screens ahead, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events that had transpired. The implications of their discovery weighed heavily on her. They had encountered something far beyond their understanding, something that could potentially threaten not just their mission, but the safety of the entire human race. "Captain, we're picking up some interference on our comms," Jacob said, breaking the silence. His fingers danced over the controls as he tried to isolate the signal. "It's faint, but it's there." "Could it be from the planet?" Carson asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. "I'm not sure," Jacob replied. "But it's unusual. The interference started just after we left the atmosphere. It might be some residual effect from that device." Dr. Price, who had been sitting quietly at the back of the cockpit, leaned forward. "Could it be trying to communicate with us?" That device was clearly more than just a machine. It was sentient, or at least, capable of some level of interaction. Nora, still processing the symbols and images that had flashed before her in the chamber, nodded. "It's possible. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just technology. It was alive, in some sense. And now, it knows we're here." Carson's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. If the interference was indeed a form of communication, it could be an opportunity to understand more about the ancient civilization they had stumbled upon, or it could be a prelude to something far more dangerous. "Let's not take any chances," she decided. "Jacob, maintain course for Earth. But keep monitoring that signal. If it changes, I want to know immediately." As the Pathfinder continued its journey home, the interference remained a constant presence, fluctuating in intensity but never fading completely. The crew tried to distract themselves with their usual duties, but the atmosphere on board was tense, the unspoken fear that they had awakened something that should have remained dormant hanging over them like a storm cloud. Dr. Price spent hours in the lab, analyzing the data they had collected from the planet. The readings were unlike anything he had ever seen: energy signatures that defied known physics, materials that seemed impervious to time and space, and that persistent signal, which now seemed to be encoded with a complex, evolving pattern. "It's almost like it's learning," Price murmured to himself as he stared at the readouts. "Adapting to our technology, our systems." Nora, who had joined him in the lab, looked over his shoulder at the data. "Do you think it's trying to tell us something? Or is it trying to understand us?" "Maybe both," Price replied. "Or maybe it's just trying to figure out what we are and how to deal with us. Either way, we need to be cautious. We have no idea what we're dealing with." Meanwhile, Jacob remained focused on piloting the ship, his eyes occasionally darting to the communications panel. The signal was growing stronger, more insistent. It was as if the entity they had encountered was reaching out, trying to establish a connection. "Captain, the signal's changing," he reported. "It's getting clearer, more structured. I think it's trying to transmit something." Carson frowned, her instincts telling her to maintain a defensive stance. "Can we decipher it?" "Not yet," Jacob said, his hands moving rapidly over the controls. "But it's definitely a transmission. I'm trying to filter out the noise, see if we can get a clear message." As the crew worked to decode the signal, the atmosphere on the Pathfinder grew increasingly tense. The unknown entity's presence was no longer just a background hum, it was pressing against the edges of their consciousness, a reminder that they were not alone, even in the vast emptiness of space. Hours passed, the signal slowly becoming more coherent. Finally, a series of symbols appeared on the main screen, followed by a low, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the entire ship. Nora's eyes widened as she recognized the symbols. "That's the same language we saw in the chamber. It's trying to communicate with us directly." Dr. Price leaned in, his mind racing to decipher the symbols. "It's a warning. Something about containment and escape. It's not entirely clear, but it's definitely a warning." Carson felt a cold chill run down her spine. "We need to get this information back to Earth. Whatever this is, they need to know." But even as she spoke, the ship shuddered, the lights flickering as the signal intensified. The entity was no longer just communicating, it was exerting some kind of influence over the Pathfinder's systems. "Jacob, can you maintain control?" Carson asked, her voice sharp with urgency. "I'm trying," he replied, his hands gripping the controls tightly. "But it's like it's trying to override our systems. Whatever this thing is, it's powerful." The ship's alarms blared as the signal grew stronger, the symbols on the screen shifting rapidly, almost as if they were alive. The crew could feel the pressure building, the entity's presence now a palpable force pressing against them. "We need to cut the signal," Dr. Price said urgently. "If we don't, it could take over the entire ship." Carson nodded, her decision made in an instant. "Jacob, cut all external communications. We can't let this thing get any further into our systems." Jacob's fingers flew over the controls, severing the connection with a swift keystroke. The ship shuddered again, the lights dimming before finally stabilizing. The signal was gone, but the crew knew the danger was far from over. "We've bought ourselves some time," Carson said, her voice steady but grim. "But whatever that was, it's not going to stop. We need to warn Earth and figure out how to deal with this before it's too late." As the Pathfinder continued its journey, the crew remained on high alert, knowing that they had encountered something beyond their understanding, something ancient, powerful, and possibly malevolent. The silence of space no longer felt empty, it was filled with the weight of the unknown, the sense that they were being watched, studied, and perhaps even hunted. The journey home was no longer just a return to safety, it was a race against time, a desperate attempt to outrun a force that had already begun to unravel the fabric of their reality. The crew knew that their mission had changed, it was no longer just about exploration, but survival, and as the Pathfinder hurtled through the darkness, the stars around them seemed to shimmer with a new, ominous light, a reminder that in the vastness of the universe, there were forces far greater and more terrifying than humanity could ever imagine.